Today, we will tell the story of how a man was able to steal more than $100 million from Facebook and Google through a unique phishing scheme that involved fake invoices. And since then, this problem has only worsened. Quanta Computer is a Taiwanese manufacturer that produces electronic hardware. The company is very prolific, with clients including Apple, Facebook, and Sony. Quanta also supplies data centers to services like Amazon, Facebook, and Google. To sum it up, they work with almost every recognizable name in technology. Because of this, they are a prime target for malicious actors looking to scam their clients. This brings us to a man named Evaldas Rimasauskas. Born and raised in Lithuania, the 44-year-old man did not seem out of the ordinary. He had been married for 2 decades and had a long work history, which at one point culminated in running his own construction business. Because of this, you wouldn't expect him to turn to a life of crime. However, in 2013, that is exactly what he did. That spring, he realized how many companies relied on Quanta Computer, and he saw it as an opportunity to make a lot of money. With the help of some associates, he devised a plan to impersonate the manufacturer. The first step was to gather enough information to accurately imitate his targets. People began calling Quanta's customer service to learn about its internal structure. This meant details like the names and contacts of key employees. This was then used to send phishing emails, which quickly gave them access to the company's email system, providing a treasure trove of information about the business. The team now had copies of their documents that could be effortlessly recreated, as well as their long list of clients. Meanwhile, the scammer began preparing for the next phase of the plan. For his invoices to pass scrutiny, the account had to appear connected to the company. He solved this by having a second Quanta Computer incorporated in Latvia. It was registered with a capital of exactly €1 by a man named Vladimir. Then Vladimir sold it to Evaldas 10 days later, who used it to create a bank account in the country. With the pieces in place, it was finally time to begin his theft. Out of all the different names associated with Quanta, they decided that Google would be their first target. The scammers started by creating emails similar to those they had hacked. From these accounts, they sent invoices with bank transfer instructions for supposed unpaid goods and services. Naturally, Google scrutinized the request, but the team took steps to make the scheme even more convincing. They fabricated additional documents such as contracts and letters. The former had forged signatures of company executives, while the latter were sealed with fake corporate stamps. This is what finally allowed them to succeed in deceiving the tech giant. And with a simple phone call, Google changed the information on file to their fake accounts. In total, they were sent over 23 million. So it took months for Google to realize they had been deceived, only reporting the theft to the authorities in 2014. They notified Latvian police, who interrogated Evaldas on suspicion of fraud. The company sought a civil remedy to compel him to appear in court. Although he tried to lie as best as he could, it was quickly ruled that the money had been stolen and had to be returned. The $23 million was frozen and eventually returned to Google. And with that, one would expect that to be the end of the scheme. But surprisingly, despite the verdict, the scammers only grew bolder, making an even bigger attempt valued at hundreds of millions of dollars. Despite having been caught, the European scammer was not ready to give up his scheme. The following year, in 2015, Evaldas traveled to Cyprus to create another bank account. He was now aware that many multi-million-dollar transactions would raise suspicions. To appease them, he showed bank statements from the first fraud to verify the company's business dealings. Then the team went to work forging a new set of invoices, contracts, and letters. The criminals decided that their next victim would be the social media company Facebook. They repeated the steps described earlier, now obtaining $26 million. But there was a new level to this plan. Because the initial loot had been confiscated so quickly, they needed a way to ensure they could keep the money. Their solution was to transfer the funds to correspondents around the world, including banks in Slovakia, Lithuania, Hungary, and Hong Kong. Even if the assistance of several countries was required to recover the cash, once the money was fully dispersed, the men attempted a bigger prize. They aimed to obtain almost 3 times the amount they had achieved before, $74 million, bringing their total theft from Facebook to $100 million. The money was sent, but it didn't get far. The large sum was thoroughly examined, leading Facebook to realize they had been scammed. The conglomerate was able to quickly reverse the second transaction, but as for the first, it was too late. Any chance of recovering those funds required the direct intervention of the U.S. government, as several of their accounts were frozen. Evaldas read the writing on the wall and tried to distance himself by selling quantum computer. But this was in vain. In March 2017, the middle-aged man was arrested upon his return to Lithuania. The U.S. Department of Justice found enough evidence to charge him with wire fraud and money laundering. 4 months later, it was formally ruled that he would be extradited to the United States. The indictment did not specify which companies were involved, referring to them as Victim 1 and Victim 2. However, their identities were leaked to the press, probably because they were so well known. The world became fascinated with the idea that such large corporations could be scammed, leading to some misconceptions, such as the headline, "Man stole $122 million from Facebook and Google simply by sending them random invoices that they paid." While the idea of a Robin Hood figure is appealing, this scheme was clearly more sophisticated. In fact, so much so that despite his arrest, the plot as a whole succeeded. Evaldas was ordered to pay a restitution of $26.4 million, the exact amount of his initial theft from Facebook, as it was never recovered, with most of it being lost since the money hadn't been frozen in time. As mentioned earlier, Evaldas had no criminal record and was otherwise a model citizen. This raises the question of what led him to a life of crime. Well, it turns out the answer was quite tragic. Throughout his marriage, he and his wife Olga tried to conceive children, but despite their efforts, they never succeeded. The couple realized that their only option was in vitro fertilization, which they couldn't afford. This led Evaldas to fall into a deep depression. He began drinking excessively until he passed out from drunkenness. His wife even recalled that in this state, he often didn't recognize her. The addiction began in 2013, exactly at the same time as his scheme. After carrying out the theft, Evaldas began to get his life back on track. In early 2017, he told Olga that he was going to seek help from a doctor to end his addiction, admitting that he couldn't handle it on his own. They then planned to finally go through with in vitro fertilization. Unfortunately, shortly after, the future father was arrested. While Evaldas is often considered the ringleader, it's actually unclear if that was the case. Prosecutors themselves speculated that he might have been acting under someone else's direction. Despite obtaining millions, he personally kept only $1,000 of the cash, suggesting there were accomplices who outranked him in the operation, and he was merely a scapegoat. His lawyer pointed out, they don't allege that he created this conspiracy. They don't allege that he provided the technical computing expertise to carry it out. They don't even allege that he translated documents from Lithuanian to English. They admit that of all the money lost, only about $1,000 went to him. He continued arguing that his client had a role that was easily replaceable. He was brought in because of his EU membership, which allowed him to open several bank accounts. Evaldas even claimed to be unaware of the entire scheme, stating, "I'm not 100% sure because they only used me to open bank accounts. After that, I did nothing more." But it's hard to take this at face value given his contradictory statements. After the arrest, the man feigned ignorance. Through his lawyer, he admitted to owning the fake company, but said it was for legitimate purposes, implying that Quanta Computer was going to develop as a construction business. It wasn't until February 2019 that the scammer pleaded guilty, agreeing to pay a fine of $49.5 million. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, as well as 2 years of supervised probation. Before learning his fate, he said, "Your Honor, I regret having committed this crime, and I can promise you that this will be the first and last time I find myself in a courtroom. I really want to return to my homeland and embrace my family members whom I haven't seen in a long time." Part of the reason behind Evaldas's confession may have been due to family matters at home. Since he was deported, his elderly mother's health began to deteriorate seriously. The 73-year-old woman began suffering from severe nervous system disorders that required irregular hospital visits. Because of this, Olga had to take care of her and help with farm work. This became especially stressful when, in December 2018, her own mother passed away. In addition to her mother, she now had to care for her father. Needless to say, there was immense pressure for the man to return home and console his loved ones. To this day, no one else has been charged for their involvement, but it can be inferred that the others likely continued carrying out similar scams. In 2019, the FBI officially termed the scam as business email compromise, BEC, one of the most financially damaging online crimes used to steal more than $26 billion worldwide. The first recorded incident was likely Evaldas's in October 2013, and since then, there has been a massive increase in companies falling victim to these schemes. Between 2016 and 2019 alone, there were more than 160,000 reported cases. Therefore, it seems likely that his accomplices did not stop and instead refined their technique over time. It remains to be seen if they will ever be caught. Although last August the Facebook case file was updated to indicate that the funds had finally been restored, the company at the center of this, Quanta Computer, remained silent throughout the entire incident. Their spokesperson made a single statement: "We did not suffer any financial damage from this incident." Unfortunately for them, months after the sentencing, they were once again victims of another cybercrime. This time, hackers infiltrated their network and obtained confidential documents from their clients, leading to Quanta and Apple being extorted for over $50 million. But that's another story. Thus ends the tale of the man who stole millions from Google, or at least the man they managed to catch.